I worked in a theater for 11 years, and I would experiment because my most fascinating, or at least one of my most fascinating subjects in this world is people. I'm a people watcher. I like to understand. I like to get into your head and understand what makes you tick and why. And for some reason, that's just very satisfying to me. And so I found myself working in the theater. I was often around large groups of people. And so I would experiment. We had a crew of volunteers downstairs. I don't know if I've ever told this story before, but this was something very fascinating to me. The volunteers were all older. This was in Florida, and they were all retirees. Mm-hmm. And I would go down, and sometimes I would have a little bit of a negative attitude towards the volunteers because they might be in my way, or they might. And I wouldn't treat them this way at all. I was always very respectful. I found that's very important in my life, to be respectful to people. However, internally, I would find myself annoyed by being in the way or wanting to chat when I've got to run to the stage because I've got 10 things to do in the next 2 minutes, and whatever. And so sometimes I would end up having that feeling and that attitude, even though I would do my best to hide it. There were other times that when I consciously, before I came down from the control room and went through the lobby and did all the work I have to do under those stressful moments of being in the theater, which are many, that I would intentionally have a loving attitude towards these people. I would deliberately say, you know what? These are people. If they want to talk to me, or if they have something to say, or they slow me down, you know what? Have a good attitude, and you keep focused on the love and the appreciation you have for these people. Every one of them are human. Every one of them knows something you don't know. Every one of them is valuable, and so on and so forth. And what I was amazed to find is that even when I was just passing through the lobby where they were usually congregating and guiding people into the theater, so on and so forth, they had a completely discernibly different attitude towards me when I had a different attitude towards them.
Even without saying anything, right? Without saying a word. There was something about the fact that I internally cared about them, loved them, appreciated them, and just focused on the good that changed the way they treated me. And they never treated me badly, but there was a discernible difference, a very real difference. And I experimented with this kind of thing because it was just fascinating to me. I mean, things seen are fascinating, but things unseen... It sounds like you're describing the real wireless. There's something powerful about loving, caring, about investing yourself in people around you. And it works. And I think if we began with changing our attitude towards other people, that everything else will become self-evident. It's like the saying, I know it sounds shallow and cliche, but love will find a way. There are so many people who I've had discussions with who were completely unaware of the things we talked about in this talk show. And they'd say, well, what am I supposed to do? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to protest? Do you want me to go do this? Do you want me to make flyers? I mean, what do you expect me to do about all this? I mean, we're fighting somebody who's so big and powerful. What are we going to do? And I would just tell them, I say, you know what? Start with yourself. If you just start to care about that person who is sick, get something for them, help them, offer aid, change your internal attitude towards that person, it's going to change your knowledge base. It's going to build your relationships. It's going to teach you about yourself. It's going to teach you about others. And you're going to grow in a completely different direction. Isn't it interesting that attitude in avionics means whether you're kind of facing up or down? Yeah. There's a very interesting symbol there, because your attitude will change the direction of your life, whether you're going up or down. So if you want to make a difference in the world, I tell these people, love your neighbor. Very simple things. Right, that's what you're talking about. But that's what I'm talking about. The reason that's so hard for people, I think, to understand is that they have this idea of what love is, that if you see somebody you think is really great in some way, their qualities are fantastic, maybe real or unreal or imagined, and you think, wow, I really love that person, or they're physically beautiful or something. But they can't imagine, since that's what love is, a kind of love where you're loving somebody like just to give it to them, not because of their characteristics. The most powerful kind of love is not an emotional love, I believe. It's
because of the way we're constructed, we have the ability to do something that I think animals don't actually have the ability to do. I think this is something, and I don't want to start any different opinions if people believe animals are one way. But the bottom line is that, you always open a can of worms, but the bottom line is that we can make a decision that will affect us emotionally, or we can be emotional and it will affect us intellectually. And I call it the push-pull. When you invest yourself in something or someone emotionally, for instance, you love your neighbor and you do, it will change you. You will become the student of that love, of that relationship, and you will learn about yourself. And the problem, why people don't see the importance of this, like when you say, well, I want to go out and stop chemtrails. Okay, what's step one? Love your neighbor. And they don't see the connection. But
no, it seems like you're just wasting time with an irrelevant topic when you say that.
Yes, they exactly. But I'm going to tell you the connection right here. Here it is. Here's the connection everybody's been waiting for. Ready? The connection between you being really, really effective out in the world and changing the world and loving your neighbor is paranoia. What? You say, paranoia? What does that have to do with anything? You want me to become a paranoid conspiracy theorist? No. The word paranoia comes from two words, par and gnosis. Gnosis means knowledge. Par means a relationship. In other words, the word paranoia means someone or the state of being able to associate one piece of knowledge with another. This is why, if you watch
TV, you're not even supposed to really know what words mean like that, are you?
They don't, right? Right, we're supposed to just know what they sound like, but not what they mean. Fortunately, I went to school long enough. I went to Maryland schools for a few years, and let me tell you, I learned more in those schools. Maryland was tough, but where they broke it down to the Latin, we start talking about the Latin or the the root meanings of the word. The word par. What does par mean? If you are on a golf course, par is your relationship of your score to the optimum score. If you are talking about parallel lines, parallel, you're talking about the relationship between the lines. They're even, their distance between the two don't change. If you're talking about parents, parents, there's a relationship between you and someone else in your family, and they are your parents. Par, there's a relationship there. So par denotes a relationship. Now, noia.
So you're talking about a relationship to knowledge.
Exactly. Paranoid is a relationship with knowledge. That knowledge is related, and it's the ability to find knowledge, the relationship between one piece of knowledge and another, which is why in the movies, when they portray paranoid people, they're the people saying, oh, the moon is in this phase, so the earth is going to do this, and this stuff is going to happen. But the thing is, if you look at the most famous, the most knowledgeable, the most deeply respected philosophers in life, or people who really made a difference in the world, these are people who understood the relationship between this piece of knowledge over here and this piece of knowledge over here. When you measure mercury vapor in the air, do you know that Jerome mercury vapor meter doesn't measure the mercury in the air? You know what it measures? It measures the resistance on a piece of gold foil. Well, what's the relationship between the resistance on a piece of gold foil and mercury? I'll tell you what it is. When mercury comes in through the pipe, it's passed over the foil. It binds to gold very aggressively. When it binds to the gold, it changes the resistance of that gold, and therefore a resistance in ohms reading is taken across that gold foil. And that's how you know how much mercury vapor is in the air. And in fact, any science instrumentation that you use to measure something that you cannot see, smell, taste, or hear, like colors outside your spectrum or sounds outside the auditory, above the auditory range that humans can hear, is measured by something that almost always doesn't measure directly or doesn't, that you can't sense. Mm-hmm. So sounds are turned into electricity shown on a screen on an oscilloscope as a wavy line, for instance. So it's turned into something else that has a relationship to what you're really seeing. So science is almost all, instrumentation in science and measurement is almost all about paranoia, if you understand what it means. So what I'm saying in saying this in this incredibly long dissertation that I didn't mean to give, forgive me.
No, it's good.
Is that when you love your neighbor, it changes your attitude. It
Yeah.
teaches you about yourself. You will learn about cancer or whatever ailment they have that you're going to go research for them and just give them some information. I do this a lot. When I have friends and relatives, they know that we do research about nutrition, herbs, vitamins, and even drugs. Some people want us to research what the interactions drugs will have with certain foods or with herbal supplements.
Yeah.
And you learn. And when you learn about those people. You have conversations. It changes your attitude. It changes you. And so when people say, love will find a way, it reminds me of those incredible mothers who had, for instance, autistic children, and they had to go bring them lunch every day, or they had to do something for them to take care of them because nobody else had the time. And in the process of doing that, they learned so much that they started an organization, an incredible blog that has 1 million hits every 2 months. They educated tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands or millions. They ended up being on television, and they taught the world something so valuable that it improved the quality of their life and maybe even saved the lives of many. And it all began because they loved. If you don't know what to do, start by caring.
Yeah.
And focus on that and invest yourself. You will become the student, and what you need to do to solve the problem will become self-evident.
Right, exactly. On the outer level, it's the last step. And what you were doing in loving those people in the theater that you were working in was changing, without saying anything, was changing their feelings and their thoughts. And what I'm thinking is, I told you before that I totally trust government as guidance. So you just have to translate, usually reverse what they say, and you have to be careful because they may tell the truth by mistake at some point or for some other reason. But if you just check it, usually you find that it's the opposite. So you notice in Hollywood and in so many different ways on the media and entertainment, TV and education and fake science, they're teaching us that you find who you think is the bad guy and then fight with them and try to destroy them. I mean, I learned that by watching Bonanza when I was 8 years old. So whoever kills fastest is the biggest hero, right? And they're still doing that on TV, and they're being equally generous with the women archetypes, and they are starting to be fast killers like the men too. And so what that tells me is that the biggest power that they want hidden is not actually in killing the bad guys. It's in what's in love. Just like paranoia means something different than the word we were taught, that unreasonable fear. It actually means a relationship to knowledge. Love is not some changeable, temporary being enamored of somebody that can change to hate overnight. It's a gift that you gave those people you were walking through the theater around. And what if we ever discovered that is much stronger than destruction, and we start directing it at the people doing the destruction?
Well, we just might change the world.
Yeah, that was my thought. So, okay.
Yeah, very fascinating, and it works. And when people make that connection and understand that by investing themselves, by loving those others around them, then things will become self-evident. So it's kind of like, the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. There's a place in the movie where he has to walk from the big tower of rock across a floor that just fell away, and there's hundreds of feet.
Yeah.
And the key was faith. He said, you have to put one foot in the other. You have to start to walk before you see a floor there.
I remember that first step going out over the abyss. And
that's right. That's right. The floor appeared there. And this is part of what I call the push-pull, is that sometimes you're pushed into a situation where you have to act like you love somebody even though you don't want to inside.
Yeah.
And it will break you down to the point where you will begin to love them if that course of events is allowed to finish.
In the beginning, when you're trying to put your foot out over empty space, it's like your mind is saying, if I love the bad people, they're just going to come and kill me faster. And the faith is, wait a minute, there might be more to it than what you're seeing.
Right. Right, and it brings that scene to mind, and I say it because I use a lot of movies and illustrations because I believe people can relate to that because so many of us have seen the same things in these movies, and there are some of these concepts that are very useful, and I think this is a very useful concept that sometimes you step out in faith, sometimes you do something even when you don't know how, because that's going to bring you to a point of knowledge. And sometimes when you know how to do something, you'll go ahead and do it, and it will bring you to a place of deeper knowledge. That's what I call the push-pull. Sometimes you're pushed into a situation, other times you're pulled into a situation, but either way, the result will end up being the same. But go with it and allow yourself to abide by these principles of loving your neighbor, caring about other people around you, and watch how it changes you. But be patient. It's not an overnight journey. But at the end of a month, when you change your attitude, take a measurement from where you are then to where you would have been had you not changed your attitude, and you'll see the difference.
Part of that measurement, too, is the behavior of other people around you.
And it's a positive feedback cycle, because as the people around you change their attitude, you ever see those people just get along with everybody? Everybody likes them, and they get along, and they help, and they're the hero, and you have to look, what is different about that person? Well, it started on the inside. It started about a decision they made. And that's why love, we're taught that love from the movies and television is all either emotional or erotic. And there's 7 different Hebrew words for love, for example. Let me just use this as an example. There's different kinds of love. There's, I won't go through them, but there are different kinds of love. And one of the kinds of love, at least one of them, is intellectual. It's where you make a decision because you want to invoke a change in somebody or in yourself or in a situation. But it's a decision that you make.
But once you make that and once you do that, there's an intense emotion that flows through it once you open up to it. It's incredible, and it's a lot more stable than the so-called emotional kind.
It is a lot more. That's exactly right. And I think that's part of the reason why the emotional kind is glorified in media, is because it is unstable and it breaks down relationships. If you are led entirely emotionally through life, through just one feeling to another without the rudder, it's like driving a ship without the rudder or a car without the steering wheel. You have an intellect, you have a will, you have the ability to make a decision. In fact, in my view, and I'm not trying to oppose anybody else's view, but just my personal view about the way I look at the world, when your intellect is a spiritual thing, if you make a decision, you are doing something spiritual. You are doing something profound, really. It's the beginning of something profound, and you will see the results of it over time. And why does it take time? Because work always takes time. We're in this big buffer right now where everything takes time. But that's a whole nother discussion. But the bottom line is you will see the effects of it when you invoke an intellectual decision. It's, don't make it all an emotional thing, and don't listen to what Hollywood teaches you and believe that that's the end all be all of the story. Make a decision, commit yourself to it, and let the push-pull effects, the laws about the way things have been created, the laws of nature, the way things work. If you just follow the rules, good things happen.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to leave it.